what was the role of scandal in producing reform? When did it produce procedural reform in Congress? When did it not?
Scandal in the 70s was incredibly important to producing reform. One of the things that happened in the 70s is you have a kind of movement that's pushing for reform constantly, pushing to change Congress, to change the primary system. And there's interest groups in place, legislators in place, all ready to pounce. So that when a scandal broke, there were people there in the 70s ready to take advantage of it. And there was a belief that scandal wasn't important in itself, but it should be used to improve the system. So when Wilbur Mills, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, gets caught in an affair with a stripper from Argentina, named the Argentinian firecracker, quickly Democrats moved to use that to reform the Ways and Means Committee. Not only do they remove him from power eventually, but they also do what we said. They create subcommittees. They weaken the power of the chairman. And again, you saw reform in the 70s. It's very different than today, being used as a tool to change the institution. It wasn't simply they wanted the scandal in themselves.
Yeah. Today they simply talk about maybe getting rid of Trent Lott or Tom DeLay as a chairman or whatever their positions are.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the change that happened. I mean, as the 70s faded, you entered into an era when that whole infrastructure pushing for reform fades. And you have a few groups, scattered groups, but there's nothing big. And so when scandals happen, nothing comes out of it anymore.
Who were the big names in the 50s and 60s who came into Congress, Julian, and decided that they wanted to see Congress change?
One who I mentioned already is Hubert Humphrey, senator from Minnesota. Before he's vice president, he's known as a bomb thrower. One of the first things Humphrey does in 1948 is he makes a speech at the Democratic Convention, and he says, Southerners, if you don't want to be in the party, leave. Bold move for a young Southerner. And he'll continue to fight for filibuster reform. Another is Richard Bowling, a Democrat in the House from Missouri who loves the institution, studies the institution, very brilliant, also arrogant, aloof. People hate him and respect him. And he would spend his whole career through the 70s and early 80s fighting to change the way the House worked and to break the power of committees. One other I would mention is Phil Burton from California, also not a very likable fellow, tough, drinking, smoking, nasty guy, but he really believed that parties should be stronger. And he fought for that. He really fought against this old form of Southern power.
Was Burton one of those Congress people who got killed down in South America when they were going to visit some group or other?
I'm embarrassed to say, but I can't remember how his life came to an end right now. I have so many figures, sometimes I forget their whole life story.
Well, there's only been several thousand of them. All right, now, Humphrey was a bomb thrower on behalf of civil rights. What was the overall impact of civil rights on the reform procedurally of Congress from the years, say, 1955 roughly to roughly 1965?
It was central. I don't think congressional reform would ever have become that important of an issue if it wasn't for civil rights. One of the things that reformers inside and outside of Congress said is that civil rights was impossible to obtain if you didn't reform the way the institution worked. And they said these procedures that are boring, that don't excite most people, have to be changed and have to be understood because they are absolutely central. So the NAACP, for example, listed filibuster reform in 1951 as equally important as ending lynching. So this word cloture ranked with ending lynching. And that's how important the issue became. There's another famous cartoon that's published in 1961 by Herblock. And when Kennedy was elected, there was a lot of expectations about what John F. Kennedy would do as president, but everyone said, if you don't reform Congress, you're never going to get civil rights, you're never going to get the new frontier. And the cartoon depicted Kennedy standing before a gate marked the new frontier, being blocked by a big angry bull. And one of the bull's horns said, House Rules Committee, and the other said Senate filibuster. And that was the connection they made between the civil rights issue and procedure.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.